I still remember the way my mother wouldn't look me in the eyes that night, how she kept wringing her hands like she was preparing for a funeral. My father stood behind her, jaw clenched, already rehearsing the lie he was about to brand onto my skin. They waited until I sat down, until I felt safe. And then they did it. They told me money was missing from the house. That only I had access. That they didn't want to believe it, but what other explanation could there be? Their voices cracked with fake disappointment, like actors pretending they weren't the ones drowning in their own mess. I felt something inside me collapse, not because they thought I stole, but because I realized they needed me to be guilty. They needed a scapegoat. They needed someone to bleed so their gambling debts wouldn't swallow them whole. That was the night I stopped being their child. That was the night I promised myself I'd make them choke on the truth they buried. Before we continue the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching from. I love seeing where my stories reach around the world. I couldn't sleep after the accusation. The house felt different, like someone had dimmed the lights from the inside. Every sound carried weight, the creak of the hallway floor, the muffled thump of my father closing a cabinet, the soft drag of my mother's slippers on the kitchen tile. Normally, those noises meant nothing. But that night, they felt like warnings, like the house itself knew something I didn't. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the door they hadn't bothered to fully shut behind them. That tiny gap told me everything. They didn't see me as family anymore, just a problem they needed to contain. I heard them whispering, my name, the money, the story they were going to stick to if anyone asked. My chest tightened so hard it felt like someone was pressing their thumb into my sternum. I wanted to walk out there and demand the truth, scream until they finally admitted what they were doing. But instead, I listened. And what I heard broke whatever innocence I was still clinging to. My father said, "It had to be done. This way buys us time." My mother whispered back, "I hate this. But we don't have a choice." Time for what? A choice about what? The questions clawed at me, but their tone, that drained, cornered tone, told me the truth was worse than the accusation itself. That was the moment I realized something. They weren't afraid of losing money. They were afraid of someone else. And somehow, I had just become their shield. The next morning felt staged, like they were performing normal for an audience that wasn't there. My mother made breakfast, the cheap kind, eggs stretched with water, toast that tasted like the toaster was giving up, and she placed my plate down without looking at me. My father sat at the table pretending to read the news on his phone, but his knee kept bouncing like he was waiting for a verdict. I didn't touch the food. I just watched them. $100. That's what they claimed was missing. The exact amount my father kept in the metal tin behind the coats in the hallway closet, the emergency stash, he called it. I had seen it 3 days earlier when I grabbed my jacket. It was still there. Untouched. Crisp bills, folded the way he always folded them. But now, suddenly, it was gone. Not stolen. Moved. And they wanted me to be the explanation that kept their world from collapsing. My mother finally spoke, her voice soft but rehearsed. "We're not angry. We just want to understand." I stared at her. "Then check the tin." My father's jaw clenched so hard I heard it click. "We did." "No," I said quietly. "You checked after you emptied it." My mother flinched, the smallest, sharpest twitch. Not guilt. Fear. The kind you get when you realize someone saw more than you expected. My father pushed his chair back, stood, and walked away without a word. He didn't deny it. He didn't correct me. He just left the room like the walls were closing in. That was when I knew. The money wasn't missing. It was already in someone else's hands. And whatever debt they owed was bigger and darker than they ever planned on telling me. That afternoon, the house felt like a pressure cooker. Doors stayed shut. Conversations dropped into silence the second I walked by. Even the air felt heavier, like it had absorbed every lie they whispered the night before. I was heading to my room when I heard it, my parents' voices leaking through the thin wall between the kitchen and the hallway. My father's tone was sharp, stripped of the fake disappointment he used on me. This was his real voice, the one he used when he forgot to pretend he cared. "She knows," he muttered. I could see it in her face. My mother sounded smaller than I'd ever heard her. "Then what do we do? If she talks?" "She won't," he snapped. "She doesn't have proof." I leaned closer, heartbeat thudding in my ears. There was a scrape, the sound of him dragging a chair, sitting hard, elbows hitting the table. "They want the rest by Friday," he said. "If we don't get it. They said they'd come here." My stomach dropped so fast I had to grab the wall. They. Not a bank. Not a loan office. The kind of they people whisper about because saying the name out loud makes it real. My mother's breath hitched. "We barely scraped together the first payment. How are we supposed to?" "We'll figure it out," he cut in, voice low and frantic. "But right now, she's our cover. If they show up, we make it look like we're dealing with a family problem, not them. Understand?" My mother didn't answer right away. When she finally did, her voice was trembling. "She's our daughter." A long silence. Then my father said, cold as cement, "She's leverage. Something in me hardened at those words. Not anger. Not sorrow. Something colder, a steady, sharp knowledge that whatever came next, I wouldn't be the one breaking. Because now I knew the truth. They didn't just betray me. They were willing to sacrifice me. And I wasn't going to let that happen. They showed up on a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of gray, silent day that feels like the world is holding its breath. I was in my room pretending to study when I heard the knock. Not a polite one. A heavy, deliberate thud that rattled the picture frame on my wall. My father froze. I heard it in the sudden stop of his footsteps. My mother whispered something, too soft to catch, but the fear in her voice slid under the door like smoke. Then I heard my father say, "Stay in your room." But his tone wasn't protective. It was strategic. I stood anyway. From the hallway, I could see the front door as he opened it. Two men stood outside. Not big, not loud, just calm. The kind of calm that meant they didn't need to raise their voices to get what they wanted. One wore a clean jacket, the other kept his hands in his pockets like he owned the entire street. My father tried to block the doorway, but the man with the jacket stepped forward, forcing him back without even touching him. "We gave you time," he said. His voice was smooth, almost bored. "You said you'd have it." My father swallowed hard. I just need a few more days." The other man looked past him, right into the house. His eyes landed on me for half a second, and something about that look made my skin go cold, not predatory, not curious. Assessing. "Days cost money," he said. "Money you don't have." My mother appeared behind my father, wringing her hands, lips pressed tight like she was trying not to cry. The man in the jacket raised an eyebrow. "You got family here," he said quietly. "Messy situation to be in debt with family around. People talk. People interfere." My father's voice cracked. "No one's interfering." That was when the man's gaze slid back to me again, subtle, but sharp enough to slice through the lie. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I wanted them to see it, that I wasn't as breakable as my parents thought. The man finally stepped back. "Friday," he said. "No excuses this time. You don't want us returning with less patience." Then they left as calmly as they arrived. No threats. No shouting. Just certainty. The door closed. My mother collapsed into a chair. My father pressed his hands to his face like he could hide behind them. Neither of them looked at me. But they didn't have to. I knew exactly what they were thinking. Friday was coming. And they were planning to feed me to their lies again. I decided, right then, that I'd be ready for them, and for my parents. The house was too quiet after they left, the kind of quiet that only happens when everyone is thinking the same terrifying thing and pretending they're not. My parents didn't talk to me for hours. They just moved around like ghosts, avoiding eye contact, avoiding each other, avoiding the truth choking the air. Around sunset, my father finally broke. He came into the living room holding the empty metal tin, the same one they claimed I stole from. He put it on the table like it was evidence in a trial he'd already decided the outcome of. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't sit. "About what?" "How you used me as your alibi. Or how you emptied that tin yourself." His face twitched, just enough to prove I'd hit the right nerve. My mother hovered behind him, arms crossed over her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. "This isn't about blame," he said. "No," I shot back, "it's about the truth you're choking on." He slammed his hand on the table. My mother flinched. The tin rattled. "You don't understand what we're dealing with," he said through clenched teeth. "You don't know what these people can do." "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me why you need me to be the thief." My mother's voice cracked. "We didn't want to drag you into this." "You already did." They both froze. Because that was the moment they realized I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't pleading for them to believe me. I knew. I stepped closer. "The collectors, how much do you owe?" My parents exchanged a look, the kind that held years of secrets behind it, but then my father broke eye contact first. That was the crack. The first real one. "We're paying off the last of it," he lied. I heard it in the tremor at the end of the sentence. "We just mismanaged things." Mismanaged. As if pawning your own kid off as a thief was a clerical error. I stared at him, and he couldn't hold the gaze. His eyes dropped to the tin. My mother's to the floor. That was it. The moment I knew their story wasn't just flimsy, it was falling apart. And I planned to rip it open completely before Friday came. That night, the house felt like it was hiding something from me, a truth tucked into the cracks of every drawer, every cabinet, every breath my parents took. They went to bed early, or at least pretended to. Their bedroom door stayed shut, but the soft creak of floorboards told me they were still awake. Whispering. Planning. I didn't bother sleeping. If they were going to drag me into their mess, I needed to know exactly how deep it went. I started with the hallway closet. The tin was still on the top shelf, empty, my father's fingerprint smudged along the lid. I moved the coats aside, nothing else. But when I pushed my hand against the back panel, it shifted just enough to reveal a small envelope wedged behind it. Inside were IOUs. Cheap paper. Bad handwriting. Dates scribbled in a hurry. Some of them went back months. One of them had my father's signature, shaky and half crossed out, as if he'd tried to rewrite the number but the ink caught the desperation in his hand. It wasn't one debt. It was dozens. Layered on top of each other like a staircase leading straight into a grave. I moved to the kitchen next. Bottom drawer, the one no one ever opens. Bills, overdue, unopened. A final notice from a credit union. A letter stamped in red, immediate action required. And then one envelope that wasn't like the others, no return address, just a single word scrawled on the front. Friday. My stomach tightened. My father must have put it there earlier, trying to hide the reminder from my mother. Or from himself. But the worst discovery came when I checked his jacket hanging by the door. Not the wallet. Not the receipts. The burner phone. Cheap. Scratched. No lock screen. He wasn't careful, or maybe he was too panicked to be. There were only 3 messages on it. We don't take delays. Friday means Friday. If we have to come inside, it's on you. My breath caught for a second. Not in fear, in clarity. My parents weren't planning to protect me. They were planning to use me again. Maybe lie about me causing problems. Maybe pretend I stole more money. Maybe make me look unstable so the collectors wouldn't question anything. I put everything back exactly where it was. Quiet. Precise. I didn't need them knowing I knew. Because information was the one advantage they didn't think I had. And I was done playing defense. Friday was coming. And for the first time, I wasn't the one unprepared. By Thursday evening, I'd reached a kind of calm that didn't feel natural, the kind that comes when the fear burns itself out and leaves something colder behind. My parents were pacing the house like animals sensing a storm. They avoided my eyes, avoided each other, but they kept glancing at the clock like time itself was hunting them. I waited until the silence felt heavy enough to break. I walked into the living room and stood between them. Not scared. Not small. Just done. We need to talk, I said. My father stiffened. My mother's breath hitched. For a moment, they actually looked like parents, nervous, cornered, unsure, but the guilt didn't last. My father straightened, trying to slip back into the role of authority. This isn't the time, he said. Oh, it's exactly the time. He opened his mouth to argue, but I pulled the burner phone from my pocket and placed it on the coffee table. The sound it made was sharp enough to stop both of them cold. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father froze mid-step. I know, I said. About the debts. About Friday. About the collectors. About the money that was never missing. My father's face drained of color. You went through my things? You went through my life. We're even. The silence that followed stretched thin, like the room itself was waiting to see which of them would crack first. My mother sank onto the couch, shaking her head, whispering, we were going to fix it. We were trying. By blaming me? I asked. By making me your cover story? Your shield? My father finally snapped. You don't understand what we're dealing with. I understand enough. I stepped closer, forcing him to look at me. I know they're coming tomorrow. I know you can't pay. And I know you plan to use me again. His jaw tightened. That was the tell. He didn't deny it, because denying it would be admitting the truth out loud. My mother whispered, we didn't want to hurt you. But you were willing to, I said. Willing to let them see me as the problem. Willing to let them think I was the reason you were behind. My father's eyes flickered, guilt, anger, fear, all tangled together. We did what we had to. You don't know what these men can do. Neither do you, I said quietly. But you were ready to let them aim at me first. His mouth opened, but the defense never came. Because it was the truth. And he knew I knew it. I'm not saving you tomorrow, I said, stepping back. Not from them. Not from your lies. Whatever happens when that door opens. That's on you. For the first time, I saw it, not just fear, but recognition. He finally realized I wasn't the shield anymore. I was the consequence. Friday crawled in slow, colorless, and heavy, the kind of morning where the air feels thick enough to chew. I woke before sunrise. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to be fully awake when everything came crashing down. My parents barely spoke. My father sat at the kitchen table staring at the same cold cup of coffee for nearly an hour. My mother kept wiping down a counter that was already clean, hands trembling so much the cloth dragged instead of wiping. Every few minutes, one of them looked toward the front door. I didn't. I sat on the couch, calm, steady, watching the cracks widen. There was no screaming, no begging, no frantic apologies, just two people slowly realizing that the lie they built to protect themselves had finally turned on them. Around noon, my father tried one last reach for control. You'll stay in your room, he said. No, I replied. His jaw flinched, but he didn't push it. For the first time, he understood he didn't get to give orders anymore. By 3 o'clock, the tension was so thick it felt like the walls were bending under it. My mother paced. My father kept checking the window. I simply watched them fall apart in real time. And then, the knock. One heavy thud that made my mother freeze mid-step. The second knock made the cup in my father's hand shatter on the floor. I didn't move. He opened the door. The same two men stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Calm. Silent. Certain. My father tried to speak, something about time, about needing another week, but his voice cracked so hard it barely sounded human. The man in the clean jacket cut him off. We don't do extensions. My mother started crying, not loud, just the soft, defeated kind that people make when they realize the trap they built is finally closing around them. The other man scanned the room. His eyes passed over me for a second, but I didn't look down. I didn't look away. I let him see that I wasn't part of this. We gave you clear terms, the first man said. We warned you what happens if you don't pay. My father stumbled over his words, trying to shift the blame, trying to drag the lie back into place, but it didn't matter. They weren't listening. They didn't care. Nothing he said could hide the truth anymore. Their house of lies had collapsed. And I didn't lift a single finger to stop it. The man in the jacket took one last step forward. You owe us, he said. And now you deal with the consequences. My father's face crumpled, fear, shame, the full weight of every choice he made crushing him all at once. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt something close to peace. Because finally, the debt was theirs again. The collectors didn't raise their voices. They didn't shove anyone. They didn't need to. Their calm was the kind that forced everyone else in the room to fall apart on their own. My father tried to explain, stumbling over half-truths, blaming unexpected expenses, even hinting that he'd been robbed. That was the moment the man in the jacket looked at him with a cold, amused disbelief. Robbed, huh? He said. Funny how every man who gambles more than he can afford suddenly discovers thieves in his own house. My father's face drained. My mother gasped, just once, like the air had been punched out of her. They knew. They knew the whole time. The man continued, slow and precise, we don't care about your excuses. We care about the debt. The real one. The one you hid behind a story about missing money. He glanced toward me then, not threatening, just acknowledging. He knew exactly who the lie was aimed at. We don't use kids as shields, he said. That's messy. And stupid. My father looked like he'd been slapped. My mother whispered, please. Don't involve. Lady, the other man cut in, we're not here for her. We're here for you too. Both of you signed. Both of you played. Both of you lost. The room went dead still. Because now the truth was undeniable, the collectors weren't fooled, not for a second. The whole performance, the accusation, the cheap lie. None of it protected them. It only exposed them. My father's voice cracked. We can pay something. We just need time. We gave you time, the jacketed man said. Now we take collateral. My mother's knees buckled. She grabbed the table to keep from falling. Collateral. Not me. Them. My father tried to step forward, but the second man blocked him effortlessly. Relax, he said, almost bored. We're not breaking anything today. You're coming with us. Paperwork, arrangements, a work plan. You'll pay off what you owe the long way. My mother choked out, but our daughter. She's old enough to take care of herself, the man replied. You made sure of that when you tried to pin your mess on her. My father looked at me then, not with authority, not with anger, not with the false power he used to carry. He looked at me like a man finally facing what he'd done. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I didn't offer a single lifeline. They took them outside. No force. No shouting. Just quiet inevitability. The door clicked shut behind them. The house went silent. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left holding the consequences. They were, and I let the silence sit there, heavy and honest, until it finally felt like justice. The house stayed silent long after the car disappeared down the street. Not peaceful, hollow. Like every lie, every excuse, every whispered accusation had finally drained out and left nothing but the truth echoing through the walls. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even sit down. I just stood in the middle of the living room, feeling the weight of everything they tried to pin on me slowly slide off my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel tight. My breathing didn't feel borrowed. My future didn't feel like something they could damage anymore. They were gone. Not dead. Not hurt. Just accountable. The collectors didn't take their possessions or their dignity, life had done that already. What they took was ownership of the mess my parents built piece by piece. A legally binding work plan, mandatory payments, supervised income, A long-term consequence disguised as a second chance. The kind that bites harder than violence ever could. Around midnight, my father called from an unfamiliar number. I let it ring until it stopped. A few minutes later, my mother texted. "We're sorry. Please don't give up on us." I stared at the message until the words blurred. Not because I was tempted to forgive, but because the apology came too late, after the lies had become weapons, after they'd used me as a shield to survive their own destruction. I typed back a single sentence. "You'll earn forgiveness the same way you earn that debt, one honest day at a time. No cruelty. No comfort. Just truth." Then I turned off the phone. The house felt different when I finally sat down, lighter, almost fragile. Not because things were okay now, but because the damage was finally theirs to carry, not mine. Justice didn't come with fireworks. It didn't roar. It arrived quietly, in the form of consequences they couldn't dodge and a daughter who finally refused to bleed for them. And that silence, that clean, steady silence, was the loudest justice I'd ever heard.